This is the cockpit of the B-1 Lancer. 4 crew. Fighter-style stick. No yoke, no traditional bomber controls. This cockpit belongs in an aircraft half this size. And right now, something outside this cockpit is doing what no other bomber on the planet can do. The Air Force calls this aircraft the Lancer. The crews who fly it call it something else, the Bone. It carries the heaviest conventional payload of any bomber in the American arsenal. It holds 61 world records, and for the first decade of its life, the Air Force wouldn't even let it fly. If you look at the B-1 on the ramp, the first thing you notice isn't the size, it's the shape. A blended wing body that flows from nose to tail without a single hard angle. Those smooth curves aren't aesthetic, they're functional. Every surface on this bomber scatters radar energy away from the source rather than reflecting it back. The result is a radar cross-section of roughly 26 square feet. For an aircraft the size of a 3-bedroom house, that's the radar signature of a small fighter jet, not stealth. The B-2 bomber owns that title, but 1/100th of a return of a B-52 Stratofortress. Radar operators expecting a heavy bomber see something the size of an F-16. By the time they sort out the difference, the B-1 is already gone. Now look closer at the nose. The 2 small triangular fins you see here, almost like whiskers, are just ahead of the cockpit glass. Those are the structural mode control system vanes, and they move with what engineers describe as hummingbird-fast precision. Their entire purpose is to counteract the violent turbulence of a low-altitude flight. Because this bomber was designed to fly at Mach 0.92, roughly 700 miles per hour, 200 feet above the ground. It's like a yellow school bus doing 200 through a parking garage. That's the scale problem these vanes are solving, threading through valleys and over ridge lines like a cruise missile with a crew inside. At that speed, at that altitude, turbulence that a commercial airliner shrugs off at 35,000 feet hits different when you're skimming terrain at 900 feet per second. These vanes, working with the lower rudder, actively dampen every oscillation in real time. They don't smooth the ride, they make it survivable. Barely. The system wasn't perfect, and the crews who first flew it had no idea how rough those early years were about to get. The terrain-following radar erred on the side of caution. If it sensed an obstacle, the aircraft slammed into a sudden 2.4 G climb for 10 seconds without warning. No alarm, no announcement, just physics grabbing the stick before the pilot's brain caught up. 4 General Electric F-101 engines sit in pairs beneath the fuselage, each hammering over 30,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. That's over 120,000 pounds combined, enough to shove nearly 250,000 kilograms past the speed of sound. People who live near Dyess Air Force Base in Texas will tell you the same thing. You don't hear the B-1 take off. You feel it in your sternum before your ears register what's happening. And here's a detail that surprises even aviation enthusiasts. The core of that F-101 engine spawned an entire family of military and commercial power plants. The GE F-110 that powers the F-14 Tomcat and later F-16 Fighting Falcons. The F-118 that drives the B-2 Spirit and the U-2, and the CFM-56, the most common commercial jet engine in the world, powering thousands of airliners on every continent right now. Today, while you watch this, 4 people operate this entire machine: pilot, co-pilot, offensive systems officer, defensive systems officer. That's it. 4 humans managing a supersonic bomber capable of delivering more ordnance in a single sortie than an entire World War II bombing group. The pilot and co-pilot sit up front with that fighter-style stick and throttle. Despite being one of the largest combat aircraft in the American fleet, the B-1 handles like something a third its size. The crews who transition from fighters describe the controls as familiar. Crews who come from the B-52 describe it as stepping onto a different planet. Pilots at Dyess will tell you, it's the world's most heavily armored minifan, with the reflexes of a Super Hornet on short final. The offensive systems officer sits in the rear compartment, running the AN/APQ-164 radar you see here. Synthetic aperture imaging, ground-moving target indication, terrain-following modes that can fly this aircraft hands-off through mountain passes in total darkness. When the pilot goes hands-off and lets the terrain-following system drive, the OSO decides what gets targeted, when, and sequences the weapons bays for delivery. Turn around, and you're looking at the most stressful seat in American aviation. The defensive systems officer sits here, alone, while the pilot threads terrain at 200 feet. The DSO reads a screen that maps every radar signal painting the airframe, every electromagnetic source trying to get a lock, every sensor sweep within hundreds of miles. Something shoots, this officer has seconds to decide. Jam the signal, drag a tow decoy behind the aircraft to seduce the missile away, or dump flares hot enough to melt asphalt. A wrong call at 900 feet per second doesn't leave room for a second opinion. The system this officer relies on almost ended the entire program. Speaking of weapons that behave like their real-world counterparts, this video is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder has one of the most detailed damage models in gaming. Every vehicle is modeled down to individual components: engines, fuel tanks, ammo racks, crew, and each one takes real damage from armor, shells, and missiles that behave like their real-world counterparts. X-ray view shows you exactly where each round penetrated, which components were hit, and what led to the vehicle's destruction. 3 game modes: arcade for fast action, realistic for authentic physics, and full simulator. Customize your vehicles with historical camouflages, unit markings, and community-created skins. Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. Use my links in the pinned comment or video description to sign up. New and returning players on PC and consoles who haven't played in 6 months get a massive bonus pack, including the exclusive Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. Available for a limited time only, so don't miss it. The original AN/ALQ-61 electronic warfare suite failed 80% of its first operational tests. Over $1 billion of hardware that couldn't reliably tell the crew what was trying to track them. But what the crews didn't know yet was that this failure would ground the bone during its first real war, while bombers 20 years older flew the missions instead. The Air Force spent roughly a decade rewriting the software from scratch. The officer sitting in this seat today trusts that rebuilt system with 4 lives every time the wheels leave the ground. The cockpit runs on the IBM AP101 computer, the same processor that flew the space shuttle. On the shuttle, NASA didn't trust just one. 5 AP101s voted on every decision. If 3 said turn left and 2 said turn right, the aircraft turned left. Democracy at 17,000 miles per hour. On the B-1, 4 separate AP101s handled navigation, weapons delivery, terrain following, and defensive coordination all at once. Reliable enough for the edge of space, reliable enough for the edge of the ground. If you stand underneath the B-1 and look up, you'll see 3 internal weapons bays stretched through the fuselage, each sealed behind doors that weigh as much as an SUV. Inside each bay sits a rotary launcher you see here, a revolver cylinder scaled up for 2,000-pound bombs. 8 positions, each one locked onto a suspension hook rated for 5,000 pounds. Sounds absurd until you do the math on a combat maneuver. A 2G turn doubles the effective weight of everything on board. Add turbulence during that turn, and those overbuilt hooks suddenly make perfect sense. Each weapon locks onto its hook through a mechanical interface that has to align perfectly. Missed by the width of a penny, and the JDAM won't receive power or data from the aircraft stores management system. It never gets targeting coordinates, never wakes up, and falls like a very expensive rock. The bomb doesn't know where it's going yet. That information stays locked inside the mission computer until seconds before release, not for security alone, but because targets can change mid-flight. The whole assembly rotates 360 degrees in under 5 seconds. 8 tons of ordnance spinning fast enough to make the airframe shudder. Imagine a bank vault combination lock the size of a car, except what's inside goes the other direction. Standard loadout, 24 GPS-guided JDAMs, which is just a fraction of its 75,000-pound capacity. More conventional ordnance than any other American bomber carries internally. A single B-1 sortie delivers almost the same tonnage that required an entire squadron of B-17s in World War II. In 2019, the Air Force pushed it further. A movable bulkhead expanded the forward bay from 180 inches to 269. 6 external hardpoints, locked down for decades, came back online. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the B-1's unclear mission evaporated overnight. The Air Force didn't just reassign the aircraft, they physically ripped the nuclear capability out of every jet in the fleet. Arming hardware? Removed. Weapons bay wiring for nuclear weapons? Pulled. External pylon attachment points? Permanently modified so nuclear pylons couldn't physically connect. Not software locked, not policy restricted. Mechanically impossible. And every year since, Russian inspectors fly to American bomber bases and walk through these weapons bays themselves. They measure the pylon attachment points. They photograph the modifications. American airmen stand there and watch Russian officers crawl through the belly of their bomber, verifying aircraft by aircraft that no one quietly reversed the work. One of the stranger rituals in modern warfare. A former enemy inspecting your most capable conventional strike aircraft to confirm it can't do the one thing it was originally built for. Those same bays are now being configured for something that didn't exist when this bomber was built: hypersonic missiles, weapons that travel at Mach 5 or faster. The B-1B could carry up to a dozen of them, making this aircraft, in its final operational years, the most heavily armed hypersonic launch platform in the American arsenal. The B-1 has 61 world records: speed, payload, distance, time to climb. More FAI records than any other bomber in history. And for the first decade of its existence, the B-1 was widely considered a failure. The original B-1A first flew in December of 1974, designed to reach Mach 2.2 at high altitude and deliver nuclear weapons deep into Soviet airspace. President Carter canceled the program in 1977, calling it one of the most difficult decisions of his presidency, arguing that cruise missiles launched from existing B-52s could do the same job at a fraction of the cost. What Carter didn't mention publicly, because it was still classified, was the real reason for his confidence. The year before the cancellation, a Soviet pilot named Viktor Belenko had defected to Japan in a MiG-25. During his debriefing, he described a new generation of Soviet fighters with look-down, shoot-down radar capable of tracking low-flying aircraft against ground clutter. The B-1A's entire survival strategy, fly low, fly fast, hide in the terrain, had just been compromised by a single defection. Carter knew something else was coming. Within months, he quietly authorized the Advanced Technology Bomber Program. The aircraft that emerged was the B-2 Spirit. Reagan brought the B-1 back in 1981, but the aircraft he ordered was fundamentally different. Engineers deliberately slowed it down, replacing the variable intake ramps with fixed geometry to shrink the radar signature. They reinforced the airframe for sustained low-altitude punishment and increased both fuel capacity and weapons load. Maximum speed dropped from Mach 2.2 to Mach 1.25. Maximum takeoff weight jumped to 477,000 pounds. They traded raw speed for survivability, and the math worked. When the first B-1Bs arrived at Dyess in 1985, the trouble started immediately. The electronic warfare suite failed 80% of its initial tests. The engines developed a fire problem serious enough to ground the entire fleet in late 1990. And the delivery ceremony for the very first production B-1B, the Star of Abilene, 45,000 people showed up to watch. But the actual aircraft had a maintenance problem, so the Air Force quietly flew a different B-1 in its place. The bomber's career started, fittingly, with a maintenance substitute. And when Operation Desert Storm launched in January 1991, the first major American air campaign in a generation, the B-1 stayed on the ground. The older, slower B-52 flew those missions instead. So the Air Force rebuilt the bone from the inside out. New computers, GPS receivers, smart weapon interfaces. The sniper targeting pod, a precision sensor originally designed for fighter jets, bolted to the chin of a heavy bomber. That pod changed everything. October 2001, Afghanistan. Over the next 6 months, 8 B-1Bs dropped nearly 4,000 JDAMs, roughly 40% of all aerial ordnance delivered in the entire campaign. 8 aircraft, 40%. The bomber that sat on the ramp during Desert Storm became the most requested close air support platform in the theater. Ground troops learned the sound. 4 F-101 engines at full power produce a rolling thunder you feel in your rib cage before your ears even register it. When soldiers called for air support and heard the bone was overhead, the response was relief, not just because of the firepower, because of the patience. A fighter drops its bombs and goes home. The bone stays. Circling at 40,000 feet with the sniper pod locked to its chin, resolution sharp enough to track individual vehicles from the stratosphere, to distinguish a pickup truck from an ambulance at 8 miles up. When the call came, troops in contact, coordinates confirmed, the weapons bays went to work. From call sign to impact, 90 seconds. The OSO sequences the target coordinates. The rotary launcher spins. The bay doors open for less than 3 seconds, just long enough for a 2,000-pound JDAM to drop clear and catch GPS signal. Doors shut, radar cross-section restored. 90 seconds from a soldier's radio call to steel on target. Not one bomb, 24 if the mission required it, each guided independently to its own coordinates. One B-1 sortie replaced a dozen F-16 runs, delivering on call after call after call. A nuclear delivery system repurposed into a precision guardian angel. The Pentagon, in its infinite talent for understatement, called this capability dynamic retargeting. The troops on the ground called it something simpler: the sound of help arriving. But that combat tempo came at a cost nobody anticipated. 5 times the sortie rate of the B-52s in some deployment rotations. Think of a sprinter who runs the 100-meter dash at full speed, a dozen times a day, every day, for 35 years. The body doesn't fail in one dramatic moment. It fails everywhere, gradually, all at once. 35 years of low-level training runs, 500 feet above the ground, 500 knots, terrain following radar yanking the aircraft through valleys. Cracked wing skins, fatigued structural joints, stressed the fleet beyond what maintenance could repair. This slow erosion in capability meant that the low-level mission that defined this bomber for 3 decades, eliminated. Not by surface-to-air missiles, not by enemy fighters, by the accumulated physics of flying too hard, too fast, for too long. By August 2019, only 6 of the remaining 62 B-1Bs were fully mission-capable. 6 out of 62. Crews in the flight line had a saying: you don't just need a spare jet, you need a spare for your spare. Today, 45 B-1Bs remain in service, split between Deas in Texas and Ellsworth in South Dakota. The rest sit in rows at Davis-Monthan Air Base in the Arizona desert, a place the Air Force calls the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group. Everyone else calls it the Boneyard. Retired B-1s stripped for parts, piece by piece, keeping the active fleet flying. Every component that comes off a retired bone extends the life of one still in service. Every remaining bone will retire by 2036. The interim bomber, a stopgap that was supposed to bridge a 5-year gap before the B-2 arrived, will have served for half a century. Somewhere at Deas or Ellsworth, a crew chief will watch the last bone taxi out, sweep its wings back one final time, and climb away from the runway until the sound fades and there's nothing left but sky. Don't forget to check out War Thunder. Play free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile using my links in the pinned comment or description. New and returning PC and console players who haven't played in 6 months get a massive bonus pack including premium vehicles and more. Limited time only. Bye for now.